example, large language models, I mean, they have access to the whole internet. So it's not like a large language model is inherently deficient in information, but that there's so much information. And so the objective is to guide the large language model into understanding how to use that information. And I think that's sort of what I think when it comes to an intern is it's like you've got this raw potential in front of you. Now, how do you aim that potential and show them how to direct it? So that way they can execute according to the objectives that you set. And a lot of that has to do with making your objectives extremely clear because they are new. And assuming that an intern or a large language model understands the context or the assumptions that you have in your mind, I think are what leads to a less than ideal output.
So there's an article that I'm going to come back to later in our conversation by Jakob Nielsen, who's a famous UI UX person in our space who we all know and love. But there's a great quote from this article where he says prompt engineers exist to tickle ChatGPT in the right spot so it coughs up the right results, which is something that at our agency we've been laughing about that quote for a while now. And something that I've heard a lot about, especially over the last year, is people sharing advice and tips and tricks on how do you make a successful prompt? Like, how do you tickle, the GPT in the right way to get the right thing? And I've heard all kinds of things and all kinds of conflicting advice. Some people say, well, there's sort of like a minimum word count that you want to shoot for, and then other people say there's no such thing. That's ridiculous. It shouldn't matter. It's about the quality, not the quantity. And of course, well, that sort of makes sense too. And then people have been throwing these other things in there, like, well, at the end, say try your best, or start with adopt a persona like you are Steve Jobs. And then, here's the prompt, right? Or one that I particularly like is at the end, if you do a good job, I'll tip you. So,
wow, yeah,
right. So but there's sort of a weird logic to that though, where if you go back to exactly what you said, which is you have this intern in front of you, right? And if you put them in the headspace of like, well, if you were Steve Jobs, what would you do? Which I guess is you're this allegedly smart person. So, put yourself in the headspace of an allegedly smart person. Right. Or, well, if you do a good job, I'll reward you in some way. Yeah. Or you give them some gentle encouragement, like, oh, just try your best, like this is kind of a friendly, just do, shucks, just do the best you can do.
Right.
So is there something to that where there's some kind of I don't know, some sort of a weird, because it's a word calculator, right? So
yes,
is there something about the I don't know, some kind of weird circular psychology of the word calculator going on there?
Yeah, I mean, I think I love that you called it a word calculator because that's what I've called it in the past as well.
I listened to one of your previous interviews, and so I'm lifting that from you.
That's really generous of you, thanks. But that's how I like to think about it because I think people look at it as if it's some sort of crystal ball or some sort of like, omnipresent deity or something like that, when in reality, it's literally just a statistician. It's calculating what's the next most plausible or probable word in a given sentence based on patterns off of the whole internet. And I think that when it comes to how to sort of change the probability of what's coming next, I don't know that I lean quite as much on psychology. I mean, granted, my academic background is in linguistics, so I'm very biased by that. But I think that because of my training in linguistics, I've been taught to think of language as a system where there are all these different pieces and parts of how language works. And when you pull on a certain lever or use a certain part, it can create a particular effect. And so I think that rather than trying to this is where the talking to an intern metaphor starts to degrade a little bit, because to an intern, using those psychological, because an intern is very fluent in social practice of language, using those kinds of sort of psychological motivators can be helpful. But in saying do your best and I'll tip you, I think about it again from the perspective of like management. So if I had a boss who told me do your best and I'll give you a bonus, but I was totally new to the situation, I would be petrified as an intern because my immediate reaction would be, I am doing my best. I don't know what else you want me to do.